Well, it is finally here, the Canon R5 Mark II. What we're going to cover today in this video is going to be the wildlife photography setup for this camera. So if you just picked one up, you know how to get it set up, and it's going to be a quick walkthrough on how to set this up for wildlife photography. Well, this is a video for you, so let's talk about it. A quick note, I'm actually out here on the balcony recording this, so there may be a little bit of plane noise, maybe a little street noise. If that happens, please forgive me for that. I want to get this out to you real quick so you guys can get started and get set up. So the first thing we want to do is we want to turn the camera on. What we're going to get, once we get this turns camera on, we're going to get the setup for the language and the time date. So go ahead and set your language and go ahead and set your time date. I'm just going to go down here and just hit OK just to get past this for now. I'll set the time and date later, but go ahead and set your time and date up here. So the next screen you're going to get is to set your smartphone up, and we're not going to cover that. Just go and hit hide next time and then get out of there. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to the red menu for the photo menu. We're going to set the image type first. So if you scroll down 1 to image type size, we're going to hit the set button, go into that menu. We're going to set it to no JPEG is what I shoot. If you want to shoot JPEG, go ahead. I just shoot just RAW. And then up at the RAW, we're going to set this to C RAW. And the reason that is, in RAW, the buffer is the same as it was on the R5. And at 30 frames a second, that buffer gets eaten up, not real fast, but fast enough. I found with C RAW, I'm getting a lot more images out of C RAW with this for the not hit that buffer so quick. So that's what we're going to do. We're set it to C RAW, no JPEG. Hit the set button again to get to OK, back out of there. Now let's move all the way over to shutter control. That's the next one we're going to change. So drive mode by default is going to be H+. That's where I'm going to leave it. That's 30 frames per second. If you want it less, you can change it right here. Next, we're going down to pre-continuous shooting. We're going to enable that. So what is that going to do? Well, at 30 frames a second, that's going to give me 15 frames before I hit the shutter, if I'm holding the shutter down halfway. So what you're going to see when you hold the shutter button down halfway, you're going to see a little pre-icon up there with the little clock looking thing, and that's going to be saying it's pre-recording those images. Once you hit the shutter, you're going to get 15 frames before the shutter, and then it's going to take stuff after the shutter as long as you hold it down. 15 frames because they're at 30, but if you're at 20, you're going to get 10, and vice versa. It's going to basically halve that out, because it's a half a second is what you're going to get. Next, we're going down to release shutter without card. So you hit that, and you want to disable it. Why are we doing that? If you have that to enabled, what happens if you have no SD card in your camera and you hit the shutter, it's going to let you take pictures, but you're not recording anything because you have no card in it. So if you turn it to off and you try to hit that shutter, it's going to tell you you don't have a card in the camera. So that's why we want to set that, because it has happened where I've gone out. I went out with the Z9 one day, went out, started shooting. I didn't have that set, forgot about it, setting that, and I had no pictures that I took for that whole series there. Luckily, I noticed up there the icon saying you have no card in the camera. Once I noticed that, I go, oh, need to go set that. So I had to set that and then go back and get a card. Then I could go back to shooting. So don't forget to set that setting to set it to off, or it will catch you at some point while you're out there shooting. Next, we're going to the assist shooting menu. We're going down to blackout free display. Scroll down to that and set that to on. What that's going to do is not give you any type of flicker while you're in the viewfinder when you're shooting pictures. Now in tab 9 of assist shooting, we're going to shooting info display. And this is where you can go to screen info settings on the next one. And this is where you can turn different displays as you go through your info button when you're looking through your viewfinder or your LCD to change those out. So I'm going to turn off 1. I'm going to turn off 2. I'm going to leave 3 on because that's the main one I use. I'm going to leave 4 on so I can see what a clean with no information looks like. I'm going to leave 5 on because that's the settings menu, and I'm going to turn 6 off. That's what I do on mine. You can do whatever you want to do on those, but that's what I set mine to. Everything else here, I just leave it default. And now we're moving to the purple menu, which is autofocus. We're going to AF operation area, the first tab, and we're going to set AF operation to servos, or we're going to have it set to. Then we're going to scroll down to AF area. We're going to set this to single point spot AF. It's going to make sense in a minute why we're doing that spot AF when we assign buttons, so just hold with me and you'll understand why. But we're going to set our autofocused area to spot AF for now. We're going to whole area tracking servo AF. We're going to turn this off. We're going to assign a button later. You can turn this on and off as you want to, but we're going to keep it off by default. Next, we're moving over to tab 2, subject detection. So we're going to change subject detect from people to animals, because we're photographing probably birds or animals. Next, eye auto detection is auto. That gives you left and right eye. We don't care which eye, we're just going to leave it to auto. Next, moving to tab 3, and this is the servo AF character. In the past, we had case 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Had a lot of them set up for us. This doesn't have it anymore. You just have auto and then whatever you want to set up. I'm going to leave mine on auto. So far, when I've been using it a little bit, it's worked quite well. But if you do want to set it to manual, what I suggest you take the tracking sensitivity and move it down 1. And acceleration, decelerating tracking, I'd probably move that down 1 also. Probably move it a little less aggressive in there, and that may help a little bit if you're having things not stick as much. So if you've got it jumping, decelerate those two, move them 1 to the left or 2 to the left and see what works for you. But for now, I'm going to leave mine on auto. As far as the autofocus, that's all I set in there. Alright, let's move to the yellow menu, which is the wrench icon, which is your settings menu. The first thing I would say with the new camera is go down to format card, whatever your card you're using it, and go ahead and format that card for that camera. If you're going to use it mainly for that camera, that just helps. And do a low level format on that. This kind of helps to get rid of any type of extra stuff that may be on one of your cards to not interfere with your camera's operation. Next, let's go down to the second tab, go down to volume. So here's where you can change your shutter volume, your beeps, your touch, and all that stuff. Really worried about the shutter volume. So I move mine down 1 here. So hit set and move it to 1. That's where I'm going to have it. I want it as quiet. I want to be able to hear it, but nothing else to hear it. So I put it really, really quiet. So I set mine to 1. Next, let's go to tab 3. We're going down to screen viewfinder display. This one's important. Changes from auto 1 to auto 2. What that's going to do is you'll see the LCD screen on the back. If you don't have your eye to the viewfinder, but you put your eye to the viewfinder, it's going to switch the viewfinder. It's going to go back and forth automatically for you. So we're going to set that to auto 2. Now for screen brightness, viewfinder brightness, all those, I just leave them to where they're set on default. But if you want your viewfinder brighter, you can go here to increase that brightness. So far, it's looked really good to me in the brightness category for me for the viewfinder. Now on tab 4, shutter at shutdown, that's where it shuts the shutter down in front of it when its camera's off. That way you don't get any dust in the shutter. So by default it's on. That's really good. The next thing I set is power saving on this tab. Go down to auto power off. I changed this to 3 minutes. Now that's a bit long. Sometimes I set it to 1 minute if I have a really slow day. But if I've got something kind of going on, I like to have it at 3 minutes because I don't want my camera to turn off, especially if I have an Atomos or a screen recorder attached to it. So that's it for the settings menu. Now we're going to move on to the green menu, which is customized settings here. This is the real important. This is where we get the dual back button and all the buttons set up the way we want to have it set up for the camera so we can stay in the viewfinder and stay shooting while we're in the field. So the very first one we hit is tab 1, customize buttons for shooting. Let's hit set to get into this one. So the very first one is your shutter button. We're going to change this very first one here. We're going to hit set. We're going to move this to metering start. That's all we're going to do. Now, if you're in manual, there's no metering to start. Remember that. It's just basically going to do nothing when we hit the button in manual. But that's what we want it to do. We want that shutter to only take pictures. That's it. So now we're going to hit OK to set that metering start. Next thing we're going to do is we're going down to MFN. What we're going to do here is we're going to do that, remember that subject tracking whole area we're talking about? We're going to set that here to turn it on and off. So let's find that setting. It is right here. Stop, start, whole area tracking AF. So let's sign that button there. So what that'll do, give you the ability to turn it on and off, that tracking that'll go all over the screen wherever it sees the subject does, no matter what type of focus method you're in at the time. I leave mine off all the time. That really hinders what I'm doing because of the way I have my buttons set up. Now there's times when I may want that, but most of the time I have it turned off. All right, let's move on to the next button we're going to set. All right, now we're going to the AF on button here, and we're going to hit set, and we're going to go in here and we're going to find the eye tracking button, eye detection AF. That's what we're going to set it to. So hit that, and there you go. So what that's going to do, that button's going to be our across the whole screen. We hit it, it's going to find the eye or the head of the body of the animal. Next, we're going down to the star button, and we're going to set this one to metering AF start. And the reason that is, that's going to be our single point. It's going to tell us to go to a certain spot. Instead of the autofocus trying to find it, I say I want to hit this branch right here, which is my thumb. That's the branch I want to hit. I want to hit that branch, or I want to hit that branch. I want to tell it where I want it to go, where I want the focal plane to go. And we'll talk about how to use this at the very end, how I use the buttons. But those are the two buttons for autofocus. Now we have our dual button autofocus set up. Now, one thing about this camera, we're going to set another button up real quick, is because the star button and the button to set up which autofocus area it is, the button, they're too close together for my taste. I was hitting either button. So we're going to set that outside button, the one that normally is set to AF point selection. We're also going to change that one. So that button for AF point selection, the outside one, we're going to set that one also to metering AF start. We're going to set them to the same thing. So if I hit the wrong button, I'm still going to have my single point set up. So those are way too close. I don't know why they put them so close, and I can't remember if the R5 were that close, but I don't remember being that close. Now I know the R6 are that close, or the R8 too. So I didn't like that part about that. So we're going to set them both to the same thing, because I don't use that AF point selection. I don't change it. All right, hit OK. All right, so that's got the button set for how I have my stills set up on this camera. I'm not going to cover video in this one. We'll have a separate one that talks about video, how I set it up, because this camera handles video a lot differently. So with the codecs and where they're all set up, and I want to test that a little bit more before I talk about how to do video settings. So far what I've got set up works, but we'll get into a little bit of that later. All right, let's hit menu to get back out of this. Now we're going to the customized dials control ring. Now let's hit OK into that one, or set that is, and look at it. Now this is set up by default the way I want it. The top one's your shutter, your back one's your ISO, and your back dial, the very back of the camera, is your aperture. That's right where I want them. That's good. By default, they've got it set up. A lot of these things in here default were set up the way I wanted already, which is really nice by Canon. Now the fourth tab here has the eye control and all that stuff. I'm not going to cover that in here because I haven't tested it. I used it on the R3 a little bit. Wasn't real happy with it. Didn't really suit my situation, and we'll talk about that later when I get into the review of the camera. But we're not going to cover that in this video on how to set that up. If you want to set that up, you can play with it and see what you think. I will be testing it, but I'm not covering it in this setup video. All right, now let's go to the orange menu, tab 3 for drive. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to change from 30 frames a second high speed down to 20. So let's hit that. So the very first one is high speed continuous plus. See, it's at 30. If you hit the set again, here's where you can change it to 20. So if you want to change from 30 to 20, here's where you would change it. I'm leaving mine at 30 right now because that's what I've been using to test with, and it's working pretty good for me so far. Now, let's get out of this menu, and be honest with you, that's it. The camera is set up for stills how I'm shooting it today and how I'm liking it so far. But again, after about a month or so, I'll tell you about, what my tested settings are, what I found, what I like, how I've got it set up for my final setup for this camera. But for now, this should get you moving. All right, real quickly, how I use this camera in the field. Just like the R5, the R8, the R7, they're all set up exactly the same as far as the button layout, pretty much. As long as the buttons are in the same place. The R7's in a different place. But anyway, as I'm shooting this in stills, all I do is I've got my shutter here, my ISO up here up top, my aperture's back here in the back. So I get that set, what I want to have it set to. And then if my animal's sitting out here in the open, I hit the AF on. That's going to track it throughout the whole screen. If I have an animal maybe behind brush in a tree that's a little busy, the autofocus, the AF on's not grabbing the bird, I'll use the single point. I'll hit the start button. What I'm doing there is I'm either trying to focus on a part of the animal that's outside the brush to get past the brush, or hit a limb close to where the animal is, or hit the animal itself. I can find a part of the animal, hit it with the single point to move that focus where maybe it's hidden up here instead of that brush, those trees hitting limbs here, but I need to hit here. It'll force that focus to go back to where the animal is. And at that point, once I'm focused through the brush, then I can real quickly slide my thumb over to the AF on and try it again. If it doesn't work, I go back to single point to get it back on the animal or to that focus plane, and then I take my shot. What you'll find is you move that finger just back and forth quick, real fast, back and forth, constantly. When you get better at it, when you're poking around in brush or trees, you'll use it. Or if you're low in the water, like we were today shooting a Pacific loon. Oh, it was so fun today shooting that guy. But when you're down low in the water, sometimes it doesn't find your animal. Use single point to get to that animal, or hit the blurry spot you see out there where the animal is, and then hit the auto AF. It's going to grab right on it. But that's how I use this camera. That's how I have it set up right now. That's how I'm testing it. And again, in a month, we'll have another video on tested settings. I hope the noise level in the planes with the street traffic wasn't too bad for you. And guys, if you've got this camera, you're going to have a lot of fun. So far, it has been a great camera to use. I've been really happy to shoot a Canon again. That's yeah, pretty much a pro quality level again, and I'm loving it. So as always, guys, until the next video, get outside and go run that shutter.